Article by Sam Quinn of CBS Sports, NBA front office rankings. Celtics, OKC at the top, Mavericks sink after Luka trade, but they're not number 30. Well, let's find out where the Kings are at. This is what Sam writes. Over the summer, I ranked all 30 NBA head coaching jobs based on their desirability. The Mavericks ranked number 5 because they had Luka, and because Nico Harrison had, in my own words, solidified himself as a strong general manager by drafting Derek Lively and trading for P.J. Washington and Daniel Gafford. Needless to say, a lot has changed since then. So today, we're going to be ranking all 30 NBA front offices. These rankings are all inclusive, so general managers, scouts, cap managers, and even owners will be evaluated as a whole. While there is no rubric set, the following factors will be considered. Does a general manager have a successful track record? Is there a clear plan? Is there a clear plan in place? Is their team winning? Is their owner willing to spend enough money to win consistently? Is their owner heavily involved in basketball decisions? Is there readily apparent who is making major basketball decisions? Has this front office done a good job hiring head coaches? Does this front office collaborate with its head coaches effectively? How have circumstances impacted their outcomes? Has a team made good decisions that have been doomed by poor health? Has a team benefited or been hurt by its market or history? Does this front office tend to sign players to contracts that represent good value relative to the market? Does this front office tend to win its trades? Is this front office notably creative in how it acquires or retains players? And lastly, is everyone in the organization properly aligned toward the goal of meaningfully competing for a championship either now or in the future? Thankfully only applies to a small number of teams, but no front office is going to rank well if it appears comfortable winning 45 games in perpetuity. Now, with all that being said, there are 30 teams in the NBA, and the Kings are not number 30. That would go to the Chicago Bulls, who the Kings love to do deals with, which ain't a good sign. If the team that you keep doing deals with is 30th, that's not a good sign. And the Kings, not 30th, but they are second to last. Sam Quinn has them 29th. 29th in all of the NBA. You know, you have the teams that are playing poorly right now. You know, for the Hornets, let me see where the Hornets are at.
Well, here's the other part of it while you look that up, is that he also organizes it by tiers.
Yes, he has tiers.
So the Sacramento Kings are in tier 11,
the worst tier. The Charlotte Hornets are in the same tier as the Washington Wizards, where it's off to a good start, but barely any track record. The Charlotte Hornets are 21st. The Washington Wizards are 22nd. Now, I cannot get down with the breakdown there. He doesn't even have a write-up for some of these tiers. And tier 11, he names tier 11, I can't defend what you're doing. Along with the Kings, you have Dallas Mavericks at number 27. I can't defend what you're doing, which they probably would have been in tier 4 or something before the trade. 28, the Phoenix Suns. And that's a bit interesting. I feel like the Phoenix Suns have tried. It just didn't work out. The Sacramento Kings at 29. So let's get to this write-up for the Sacramento Kings. The resume sort of speaks for itself at this point, doesn't it? One playoff berth in the past 18 seasons. A unanimous coach of the year, fired less than 2 years later. Their best player traded because they knew he wouldn't re-sign with them. That decision was not motivated by market. De'Aaron Fox landed in San Antonio. After all, it was because Fox knew he couldn't compete for a championship in Sacramento. History suggests he was right. The Fox situation might have been an opportunity for the Kings to look forward and perhaps reevaluate their organizational priorities. Instead, they have proven so desperate to recapture the good vibes of 2023 playoff berth that they rolled the dice on Zach LaVine's very dangerous max contract to put together a roster whose ceiling is ... maybe winning a single round. The Kings are built around a 28-year-old Domantas Sabonis, a 29-year-old Zach LaVine, and a 35-year-old DeMar DeRozan. The time to win is emphatically right now. Yet they don't have a single 2025 All-Star. Domantas Sabonis was snubbed. I'll throw that in there. And there are 2 playoff caliber defenders on the entire roster. This is a team that caps out at 46 or 47 wins. That's only something to aspire to when you've been in 17 of the past 18 lotteries. And we're not giving the Kings credit for 2 decades of poor decision-making. Wow. Wowee. Now, the Drive guys talked about this on Friday, and there was a little conversation about Sam Quinn doesn't typically say positive things about the Kings, and he doesn't normally have glowing returns on the Kings. But you read something like this, and I would kind of push back and say, where is he being unfair? Right? I mean, I don't know that the Kings should be 29th. But the write-up, I don't know, is terribly unfair. When he goes on to say their best player traded because they knew he wouldn't re-sign with them, is that, not to get too in the weeds, but because of the Mike Brown thing, is that why they moved on from him? I don't know that was ever completely confirmed. I think that's Sam just kind of reading the tea leaves there. So I don't think the write-up is crazy at all. I don't think the write-up is terribly disrespectful from the outside looking in, but I don't think the Kings are the 29th ranked front office in the NBA.
Yeah, it's giving credit to teams, or giving the benefit of the doubt to teams that don't have front offices long-term in place. I mean, the
Right.
Hornets, like I said, they're brand new. Washington, they're brand new. So it's like it's not giving punishment to them while also holding the last 20 years against the Sacramento Kings, when I would argue you should only hold the last 12 years.
Yeah.
Because that's when Vivek took over the team. So I guess you should only hold 12 years against the Kings, which isn't going to save them that much in the rankings. I think ultimately it's semantics. And if you look at the other tiers, it's like, the only other tier you could consider them for is I have real questions.
That's exactly what I'm looking at. The Portland Trailblazers, thinking they have 14 young and maybe he says, hey, at least you have young talent to make decisions on. The Kings don't. They're just in different places in their cycles. So I guess I understand, you got Donovan Clingan. At some point, you're probably going to move Jeremy Grant. So you do have some pieces, but I'm just thinking about teams that are bad teams. And to me, the most egregious one, not to lose a plot, is you can't having the Hornets at 21 is pretty crazy. I mean, we didn't even talk about this, but my pick to Jean Salon, that he needs work. He needs work. And they're gonna, I guess, in his opinion, they'll still have opportunities, right? They're going to be in the conversation. We have the odds for Cooper Flagg coming up here, but they have they have opportunity to get more young talent. Whereas he's basically harder on purgatory than they really stink right now, but they have young talent. He is the hardest on. I don't like he said, I can't defend what you're doing. I would say I can defend what the Kings are doing. Once the conversation became De'Aaron is looking at one team in the Spurs. So again, we're still arguing that the Kings are in the lowest, one of the lowest tiers in the NBA. But I do think making them second to last is a little much.
Yeah, I'm reading his analysis on the Trailblazers now, and I understand why he didn't put Portland and Sacramento in the same tier, because he's giving Portland credit for waiting on the Damian Lillard trade until a deal they felt was quote unquote good enough. And I think he's saying the draft picks they got in the Lillard trade will ultimately prove to be pretty good. But I guess he's giving them credit for holding out for the deal they wanted versus Sacramento, who traded away De'Aaron Fox for 70 cents on the dollar at the deadline instead of carrying it into the summer and getting a deal back that he felt was worthless, or at least not worth its while in getting Zach LaVine, because that could, in theory, set you back years if that trade doesn't work out. But
yeah, he's got the Pelicans 13, by the way. And again, this isn't based on their record. It's based on their future and their assets.
Yeah. And some teams are in tiers by themselves. Like, example, he has Minnesota at 19, but he also says they're the single hardest team to rank because they just made this terrible Karl Anthony Towns trade to save money, but they were also just in the Western Conference Finals last season. So I kind of get the playing it back and forth, and this is the thing that stinks. I have an argument with his analysis of why the Kings are 29, but based on his ranking, I can't make an argument for them to move up into any tier, because you're in year 5 with Monty McNair. At this point, you're going into offseason 6 with this front office. Mm-hmm. You're going into, unlike the Charlottes and the everyone else's, you did just make a trade that probably made you worse in the short term, but could make you better in the long run based on how LaVine plays and those picks work out. So all in all, I don't think they're the second to last, but I also don't think he's that far off on the analysis. Because if Portland it's a tier by himself, and he's giving them credit for the Lillard trade, which they probably didn't get equal value in return, but at least they probably got more for Lillard than what he was worth than what the Kings got for Fox.
Yeah, we'll never know. I'm of the mindset that I don't necessarily know how much more they could have gotten for Fox. I see, people in the Sac chat, William Bishop, they traded Fox for peanuts. I don't know. We'll never know. I'm not quite sure that the return would have been that much greater if he was sticking to the Spurs only thing. That's my issue. If it was all teams on deck, or if there was a list of 6-7 teams or even 3 teams, right? I think the return may have been greater. And we always know this is how this thing goes, right? You're never going to get back what you lose. I think where Sam Quinn is kind of bagging on the Kings is their refusal to just say uncle, and deciding we're going to piece this thing together because we don't want to go full rebuild. And to your point, Kyle, nobody wants to go full rebuild during a season, right? That would have been a disaster. So you would have been better off, even though I think he was kind of coasting, you would have been better off taking whatever you get from De'Aaron, kind of holding his feet to the fire, where it's, hey man, you're still trying out. That's the one thing. De'Aaron could have not wanted to be in Sacramento, and Rich Paul reaches out and says it would be better to move De'Aaron now, but you're essentially calling De'Aaron's bluff that you don't want to look bad as far as what teams may want you. So once the trade deadline ended, you might have gotten the most motivated De'Aaron Fox we would have seen, because he does want to get out and he wants to show people what he can do. So a way to look at this is, fine, De'Aaron, you want to go? We can have that conversation in the offseason, but we're not doing that to this fan base. We're not doing that to DeMar DeRozan. We're not doing that to Domantas Sabonis. We're not doing that to Malik Monk, who signed here as your boy. Look, we will have this conversation and we will find you something on the other side, but we know that you are going to play your butt off because you want to look good for wherever you go next, right? Instead, you got a half-hearted De'Aaron for the last 4 or 5 games in his career here with the Sacramento Kings. And I don't think that affected the return, because I think everybody was sleepwalking and it was dead men walking. But I think that's where Sam is saying, if you did go on to simply just wait it out, you call De'Aaron's bluff, he does not want to look bad. And then when you get to the other side of it, in the offseason, we can have that conversation. Maybe you mess around and miss the playoffs, and De'Aaron changes his mind and finds out he actually does like Doug Christie. Clearly, he's willing to play for another coach, because he ain't even playing for Greg Popovich right now. All right, on the other side, let's keep the conversation going. Got some texts to get to and get some calls as well. Sorry.